98% of the world is working on central bank digital currency. I'm going to talk to you about Project Enbridge, which is a technology that is being piloted and tested by not only the BIS Innovation Hub, which is the central bank of central banks, but also central banks all around the world are working and testing similar technologies that are going to be developed and brought to not just banks, but also the public-facing consumers with wholesale and retail CBDCs globally. So let's talk a little bit about what Enbridge is, how it's been developed, what countries are working on this, as well as what role could something like XRP play in this type of technology. This is going to be a great video. Thank you for joining me. I'm Crypto Sensei. Let's get into it. So, experimenting with a multiple CBDC platform for cross-border payments. This is October 2023, so it's about a year old. I'm going to give you the highlights and the updates for what's going on with Project Enbridge. So, Project Enbridge experiments with a multiple CBDC platform for wholesale cross-border payments, focusing on the use case of international trade, which has the potential to connect central banks and commercial banks around the world for public good. So if you're not familiar with this, central banks are usually connected to all of the commercial banks in that particular country and helps to process payments through the central bank. And this is the same thing with a wholesale CBDC. Wholesale CBDCs are for commercial banks. Retail CBDCs are for people like me and you, and businesses to use for paying customers for businesses to paying customers. So what does this look like? You have a jurisdiction A, you have a jurisdiction B. You need KYC, AML, and counter finance terrorism checks on every single payment and consumers that are hooked up to this, as well as banks, right? That's why anything that's baked into Ripple's technology has KYC, AML, and CFTC checks, because that is what banks need to use, right? And I really think that if you're looking to get into a crypto asset and you're really looking at the overall picture of who could use that particular technology when it comes to payments, I think every single adult and maybe a kid over, 12 or 13 can use a wallet that you can trade digital currency or move digital currency and pay for things, right? So, of course, you have Enbridge in the middle here. The technology at the heart of the experimental platform developed for Project Enbridge is a purpose-developed permission DLT called the Enbridge Ledger. Interesting, ledger, right? Or MBL, that supports instant peer-to-peer and atomic cross-border payments for XF transactions using a wholesale CBDC. And this is kind of what you have around it, right? And so you have its ISO 20022 compliant, which we know is going to be the new standards for all cross-border payments come November of 2025. Banks are transitioning to this new standard. And you do have Ripple, which was actually on the ISO 20022 body, helping to figure out and write these new rules of the road for the world's central and regular banks. So it has to be, it's EVM compatible, it is lay compatible, you have dashing consensus, co-development, there's a lot of different things here. But what I did is I found a video that kind of explains everything in a little bit better detail. I know you like watching videos. I do too. We're going to go ahead and play this, but I want you to focus on the bottom of this picture really quickly. We have the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, you have the Bank of Thailand, you have the Republic People's Bank of China, and you have the Central Bank of the UAE. If you dig down into these countries, you know that Ripple's been in these countries and are working with some of these central banks actually right now on different technology, as well as commercial banks in these particular countries. So let me go ahead and play this and we'll talk more about what Ripple or XRP's role could be in these type of systems.
The global economy has become more integrated, but cross-border payments have struggled to keep pace. International payments are typically made through a global network of correspondent banks. While critical to enable cross-border payments, they have also introduced pain points and friction. Each correspondent bank in the chain requires time to process the payment, repeating similar checks at each step. This results in high transaction costs, slow payments, and opaque transactions to the end users. Additionally, correspondent banks are paring back their networks, leading to a form of country financial exclusion. This creates a situation where some countries no longer have first-tier access to the global financial system.
So if you're wondering kind of like what countries here, so the US has a lot of, authority in the current financial system. And because of what's happening with, let's say, Russia and Ukraine, Russia was kicked out of using the SWIFT banking system, which is the current banking system. And so certain countries can be excluded if those countries do things that maybe the countries that are in power don't like. That is what they're talking about here, if you're listening.
The Bank for International Settlements Innovation Hub is exploring solutions for overcoming these limitations. The aim is to allow cross-border payments to be immediate, cheap, widely accessible, and settled in a secure medium. A possible solution would be a multiple central bank digital currency platform, or MCBDC. That is, a technical platform that directly connects digital central bank money. Building on earlier CBDC prototypes, the BIS Innovation Hub and the 4 participating central banks joined forces to bring to life such a multi-CBDC platform named mBridge, which stands for Multiple CBDC Bridge. By providing a shared platform on which participants can conduct peer-to-peer payments directly across jurisdictions using safe local central bank money, mBridge can tackle the pain points of international payments, advance cross-border settlement in digital central bank money, and support diversification of currencies in cross-border transactions. Over the past year, the project team has moved mBridge from a prototype to a pilot phase. From August 15th to September 23rd, a pilot focused on payments for international trade successfully took place on the mBridge platform. This was the largest multi-CBDC pilot involving real-value cross-border transactions among commercial banks from 4 different jurisdictions.
Really quickly, before we move on here. So ICBC, Ripple partner, right? Ripple has actually talked with the Bank of China and has been in discussions, and they actually had meetings this year. Standard Charter, Ripple partner, HSBC, Ripple partner, right? You have, let's see here, you have HSBC, Bank of China, IBC. There's probably some other here that are actually Ripple partners, but what I want to kind of show you is when you're talking about a different type of crypto asset and who they're actually partnered with and what banks can actually use that, you are talking about billions of people here, right? People's Bank of China, you have over 1 billion people in China. You have Standard Charter, HSBC. If you added all this up together, you have a lot of actual customers that could actually start using this technology. And that's really the main thing I want to focus on with this comment.
4 central banks and 5 commercial banks from each jurisdiction, for a total of 24 participants, took part in the pilot, with the BIS Innovation Hub acting as a central coordinator. The pilot consisted of 3 basic transaction types. First, issuance and redemption of CBDC between central banks and their domestic commercial banks. Second, simple one-way cross-border payments between commercial banks. And third, cross-border atomic payment versus payment for foreign exchange between commercial banks. The pilot was conducted in 3 phases, with each phase seeing an addition of a new jurisdiction. A total of $12.1 million in all 4 CBDCs was issued onto the platform. This facilitated more than $22 million in cross-border payments and FX transactions made through over 160 transactions.
A lot of transactions.
The pilot demonstrated the platform's ability to transact real value payments in a real-world setting.
All right, it just kind of goes into the pilot phase. But let's talk about, so this is by Spoke, DQG, if you want to follow them on Twitter, you can, which is why the role of possible Ripple's role in Project mBridge becomes clear when you see the demo of mBridge, which incorporates a MCBDC in addition to the fact that Ripple's on-demand liquidity can maintain liquidity pools for the CBDC bridge. So just clicking on this really quickly, I'll just read the highlighted parts here. So once central bank digital currency or CBDC systems are implemented, to integrate them for exchange and payments messages through arrangements like MCBDC or interlinking, Ripple, a leader in distributed ledger technology-based DLT cross-border payments, has already adopted the ISO 20022 standards. Hence, we could possibly see another DLT blockchain-based network to follow suit. And you have a lot of them that actually have followed suit. And so in the documentation for this, you also have who will maintain a liquidity pool for some of these transactions. And so the first suggestion here under A is financial institutions chosen by the SWIFT system or Bank of International Settlements shall fund liquidity pools with currencies required for an exchange. In return, these financial institutions can charge a transaction amount to the bank. For example, the MCBDC experiment, the Bank of France was charged 10 basis points by the liquidity pool on the amount it was transferred. You also have the second way, which is B here. The second way is to maintain the liquidity pool is by bringing the MCBDC bridge on Ripple's on-demand liquidity program, which can also facilitate that, which I think could be a real solution. Then you also, here, I just want to show you one thing here. You can actually, it talks a little bit more about the native asset representing it, which would be XRP used in some of these transactions for cross-border payments. You have the ECM, right? And then you have EHKD, ETIBOT, AED, excuse me, let me just play this. So Chinese currency, Hong Kong, Thai baht, and the AED, I believe, is the currency used in the UAE. So let me play this.
Including access approval rights to onboard selected domestic commercial banks and the ability to set transaction limits and parameters such as the maximum amount they can hold in their wallet or transact in a single cross-border payment. Central banks can also set alerts for foreign exchange rates.
All right, so we talked a little bit about that. So also we have here James Walls from Ripple, the head of CBDCs for central bank engagement. XRP Ledger is one of the models being discussed for mBridge within the BIS. Ripple did join the BIS task force, which is also another sign, right? You always look for the ISO 20022 body. You look for the BIS task force, right? All of these are connections which are vitally important because the BIS, which is the central bank of central banks, right? They help set policy. I think it's like 63 central banks globally. I could be wrong on the number. I know that it's always changing, but Ripple helps the BIS on this task force kind of set all of this, which is, I think is really exciting. But here, listen to this by James Walls.
We're using the same technology that is with the XRP ledger. The token would be the CBDC. So the central bank would actually create their own token, a digital euro, digital dollar, whatever the market is. And that becomes the digital asset.
So that becomes the digital asset. Keep listening.
The native coin.
The native coin, yeah. Now, where XRP could come into play potentially is when you're looking at cross-border CBDC. So when you have a digital dollar and you have a digital, real, or digital pound, you obviously need to have some way to interact cross-border. So the BIS call this a multi-CBDC model. One of the ideas is you use a sort of a neutral bridge currency to go from one to the other, similar to the model I explained earlier, with our on-demand liquidity.
All right. So understand, you still need a bridge currency to go in between different currencies, right? And what is XRP? It's a bridge currency. And so it's pretty much perfect for what they're trying to do here, which I find vitally important to the future. Now, one thing that people don't understand currently, right? They look at the price of XRP with all of this news and they're saying, God, why isn't XRP going up? It's going down. Right now, no matter what anybody tells you, we are in a speculation crypto market. We have yet to reach a utility bull market, okay? That may be happening next bull market, but it's not happening this time. In order for us to reach a utility market, you need global regulation, right? You need adoption. You need people actually using the technology. That's when you've reached a utility market. Right now, all me and you are doing is speculating on what we think the value of an asset should be. That is a speculation market. And I just want to make that clear because I see it all the time in the comments, right? We are still in a speculation market. All right. Also, BRICS Pay. Countries are expected to be made in wholesale CBDC. XRP was created to be a neutral bridge asset, and the Ripple net extends far into the largest parts of the BRICS nations. Ripple has numerous connections in BRICS. You have SBI and Ripple, which is also in Japan and India. HSBC, which is in China. You have Onafric, MFS Africa, Ripple, and then you have Banco Brazil, which is also another Ripple partner, right? You do have a ton of connections in each of these countries, okay? And most of these countries are Brazil, Russia, India, and China, South Africa. The BRICS nations are actually getting more countries to join them every single day. I had a really good long talk about this in my last live chat. If you haven't seen that live chat, go back and watch it. I went through some of this stuff, but we actually talked into this in very big detail. And that was, a 30 or 40 minute conversation if you really want to get into the weeds into some of this stuff. But look at all the different partnerships with banks in these countries. So here's Russia, okay? Here's India. You have Brazil here, China, all these different banks in China, and then you have South Africa. So Ripple really is, when the SEC sued Ripple, instead of kind of saying, hey, we're not going to, expand the business, we're just going to deal with this, they went out and they made all these partnerships globally. And I think that made them even more powerful, right? That's why they did a lot of hiring. That's why they expanded. And it really does show when you zoom out. And so somebody is in the comments is going to say, well, they're not using the technology now. You're probably right. Most of these banks can use the technology, but they need regulation, right? They need adoption. This is still going to take time, right? No matter what you say, you can't deny the partnerships, okay? And if you count how many people this covers, you are in the billions of people, right? Thunes, right? Just Thunes, I brought this up in the last chat. Thunes has a partnership with Ripple, and they are connected to 3 billion mobile wallets. 3 billion mobile wallets. That's a serious deal. And so, hey, take this with what you will. Do your own research. Come back. If you are trying to take your crypto journey to the next level, we do have a Discord that I'm the head of called Cryptonaires. We actually have a free trial to that Cryptonaires down in the description. Please sign up. It's free for the first few days. You can come in, take a look around, meet people that are like-minded with you that are also trying to find the next big thing in crypto. When you have hundreds of people all working on the same thing, you're going to be able to tune into more information, new projects that you probably didn't have access to before. And, this is how you change your life, because you make these connections with people and they help you be a better version of yourself. They help you research. They help you find projects. They help you learn. They help you grow. And that's the important part. And that's what we do have in my community. So I'll see you there. Aloha. Take care.